cams just showed up. Now, these are not going to look any different to anybody. I'm going to open them up so that I can show the profile of them compared to stock and compared to our previous cam system that we were running a while ago. So there's one, which this is the exhaust cam. And there's two, which is our intake cam. So, that looks fairly normal. And I'll be honest, when I put these next to a stock one, probably not gonna be able to tell the difference. Here we have a set of stock cams. This is exhaust, this is intake. Sorry, exhaust, intake. Again, visually, probably not going to see a difference on camera. Obviously, that way they're going to be the same. But if we look at them from above, we can see a difference in shape. You kind of see this is a little more pointy. And I'm going to explain why that is and what exactly we had done. So this next part, I'm going to read from a script I wrote because there's a lot of technical information. Doing it off the top of my head probably isn't the best part. So as I go through it, I will show diagrams and photos and things of the differences and explain why these cams are best for what we're doing. These cams are only good to a certain amount, and our previous race cam was probably not the best choice as far as what we are doing with the car. And then I will go over our street cam that we used to sell, which we ran up to 500 horsepower before, but we'll go over that a little bit too and explain the difference between a factory grind and our street cam grind and explain where the changes were.
All right, so let's discuss the cam choice we've made for our drag car and discuss the limitations of the MR engine camshafts. This is our third time making cam profile for these engines, and we've learned quite a bit as we've gone through them. Today, because of the performance-only use of the engine, I want to go over a previous race cam profile and compare it to our newest race cam profile and compare both of those to stock profile and talk about our street profile that we use. But first, let's go over some key terms. First term is duration. This is the time that the valves stay open, measured in degrees of crankshaft rotation. More duration means the valves are open longer, which helps at higher RPMs. Lift, this is how far the valves open. Higher lift allows more air and fuel to enter the engine, which is essential for making more power. Lobe separation angle, or LSA. This is the angle between the intake and exhaust cam lobes. A wider angle helps improve performance at higher RPMs. Now it is important to remember that this is a cam regrind that we had done, so there's not a whole lot of material to work with. So something like the LSA typically isn't going to have a lot of room for change, which in this case we didn't change it at all because of the limitations of what we were doing. And also because this was a cam regrind, we are restricted to working within the existing cam profile. We could have had material welded on, but just for the cost consideration for the application, we didn't want to do that. Maybe down the road we will. But again, it is important to remember that we are operating within the confines of the factory profile and what we can realistically regrind down to. Would we like huge amounts of lift and huge amounts of duration? Yes, which we'll get into more soon, but it's just not something that you can go crazy with when you're doing just a standard regrind. So now let's compare three camshaft profiles: the base profile, the first race cam profile, and our current race cam profile. So the base cam has an intake duration of 240 degrees, an exhaust duration of 244 degrees, LSA of 114 degrees, and the lift on the intake is 0.37 inches and the exhaust lift is 0.31 inches. This base profile is designed for general purpose. It provides good low-end torque and a smooth idle, but it's not great for a high boost or high RPM application, which the cars that this cam is used in are sub 200 horsepower street cars. And in the factory juke boosted application, that turbo is designed for a low to mid-range torque gain where you don't need a camshaft that takes advantage of the top end, as the turbo is not designed to perform much more than what it's at. So our first race cam had an intake duration of 280 degrees, an exhaust duration of 280 degrees, an LSA of 114 degrees, a lift of 0.373 inches, and on the exhaust, a lift of 0.371 inches. So this had a longer duration, so the valves stay open longer. So that's 280 degrees versus 240 and 244, which is great for the high RPMs because it allows more air and fuel to enter the engine. It has a slightly higher lift, not by much, but a little bit more, which means even more air and fuel can get in, which boosts power, obviously. Now our current race cam, this newest one, has an intake duration of 272 degrees, an exhaust duration of 264 degrees, a lobe separation angle of 114 degrees, a lift of 0.39 on the intake, and exhaust lift of 0.35. This has a bit more duration than the stock profile, but a little less duration than our first race cam. This kind of strikes a balance between high RPM power and mid-range performance. We do rev the drag car out to over 10,000 RPM. So we are trying to get the turbo to spool up, which means we kind of want some of that heat in the mid-range, and we want to get some airflow in the mid-range. We don't care about the low end. It's mid and up where we're trying to get the turbo to light. And this has a much higher lift than the previous race cam, and a significantly higher lift than the stock cam. The first race cam, the longer duration and the slightly increased lift make this profile perfect for high RPMs and ensures that the engine can take in air and exhaust the maximum amount of air and fuel, crucial for making big power into high boost conditions. However, this profile is more suited for constant high-speed applications rather than short bursts, which this is being designed for a drag car. So our previous race cam would have been better applied to something like a time attack car or even an autocross car, where you're staying up at that higher RPM for much longer. The new race cam balances the high RPM benefits with a little bit better of a mid-range performance and throttle response, which is important in drag racing. The higher lift ensures that even more air and fuel obviously get into the engine, which is vital for making more power under a higher boost level. The slightly reduced duration compared to the first one helps improve the drivability and responsiveness, which are crucial for quarter mile racing where both rapid acceleration and top end power are needed. This makes the current race cam profile a better choice for quarter mile racing, as it provides a strong launch off the line and maintains power throughout the run. So basically, 60 foot is everything in drag racing. This car is going to launch at 6,000 RPM, which to us is the mid range, which we did discuss this with the cam company that designed these with us. So we do care about that for a little bit. Now, the car is always above basically 8,000 RPM after second gear. So we are just trying to get some more mid-range out of it. Now, obviously, we have the higher lift, which is the most important thing with the amount of RPM and boost that we're running, because we need basically as much air and fuel to get in there as we possibly can. So that's kind of the differences here. Now let's go over why the factory cam sucks for performance. Again, just talked about how the factory application is not high horsepower, high revs. It's made for an economy car. They're trying to maximize low-end torque along with fuel economy at highway speeds. The VVT obviously helps with these things. The problem is you start choking the engine as you get up into higher revs. When we spoke to the gentleman at the cam company that helped us with these, he kind of laughed and he said, "I can't believe you made the power you made on these cams. These would choke the engine," which is the problem we were running into. We were having extreme torque rollover after we hit full boost, no matter what we did, which was caused by the cam profile. So by increasing our duration, obviously that's going to help that because it gives more time for air and fuel to get in and exhaust to get out. And increasing the lift obviously fixes that. Now, we have a street cam, which I can't find the cam card for, unfortunately, which is essentially a toned down version of our first race cam. It is significantly more duration than stock. I want to say it's like a 260 for duration. And then it has the increased lift of our race cam. So, well, sorry, it does not have the increased lift of our race cam. It's the factory lift. So essentially, that would be good for, 350, 400 horsepower. Once you get above that, you're kind of starting to stretch it, but you'd be able to take it a lot further than the factory cam. That cam is for cars that are going to drive around every day. You don't want a crazy duration and crazy overlaps in a car that has to get driven around every day. That leads to all kinds of drivability problems. So we have always said that once you hit about 330, 350 horsepower, you're fighting the factory cam profile. And obviously this data supports that. We've always had torque drop-offs after that 330, 350 horsepower area. Always. The first person that we had tuned our cars before we tuned our own, he was the one that kept hitting that 330 wall. And then as soon as we swapped into our street cam, the car made 400 horsepower effortlessly. So if you're chasing huge power and high revs, get a cam regrind. Uh, if you're chasing like 300 horsepower and a fairly small turbo, the factory cam does work fine. Can you make more power with less stress with an upgraded cam? Yes, but installing an upgraded cam in these engines is extremely time consuming. So you kind of have to weigh that out. If you're going to do it yourself, maybe it's worth it. If you're going to have to pay somebody to do it, probably not worth it. So that is the information on the MR cams and more specifically our new race cam that we're putting in our drag car. If anybody is interested in having their cams ground to this, just send us an email and we will gladly help you out with that.